perhaps be inclined to reply to the question of today's policy forum, which is, should the United States be more like Scandinavia? I would be inclined to say no, it should not. At least in the way that it is commonly perceived that Scandinavia is when it comes to economic policy. Because then it's many politicians all around the world who want to expand government and raise taxes and make more state interventions in the economy. They look to the Scandinavian countries and say, hey, they're so successful despite big government, despite the welfare state, despite the high taxes. But I would say that it is exactly that way. It's despite those things. It's because the Nordic countries are so free market in other respects. So you should not copy that part of the Nordic countries' economic policy model. And I would like to expand a bit about that today. So it's very important when you look at these countries or any country, learn from the right things, copy the good things, don't copy the bad things. And when it comes to the Nordic countries, don't copy big government, do copy the free market. Let me start by my home country, Sweden. Between 1890 and 1950, Sweden was enormously successful. It went from being a very poor agrarian country to becoming a wealthy industrialized nation in 60 years, one of the highest growth rates for 60 years in the world. Sweden was, during that time, what would today be referred to as a neoliberal country. It had a tax pressure of 10% of the economy. It increased all the way up to 20% of the economy in 1950. It had limited government and extremely free markets and open to free trade. That was the enormously successful Sweden that built the prosperity that we still live from. But roughly from 1970 onwards, we had problems in Sweden because of vast and growing government interventions in the economy. Extreme taxes, rising in 30 years from 20 to 50% of the economy. Extreme regulations, particularly in the labor market. Lots and lots of government-delivered welfare services, government social security. So we had lots and lots of problems. And we can see today, of the 50 biggest companies in Sweden today, only one has been started after 1970. 49 of the 50 biggest started before 1970 in this prosperous country, which was more of a neoliberal country than anything else. And so we have a world where many countries are very successful. You can go to Ireland or Australia, New Zealand, Iceland, Estonia, Slovakia, or even to Marianne Tupis, the Czech Republic. And you can see these are very successful countries because they have done so enormously radical free market reforms compared to other countries. And they have increased growth rates, they have increased employment, they have decreased unemployment, and they have had a better living standards. But so why do politicians in France, Italy, Germany, or even the US not look at these countries for inspiration? Because it's politically controversial to do radical free market reforms, despite the fact that these reforms have been so successful in these countries. It's politically controversial to say that we shall copy the radical reforms of Ireland or Iceland or New Zealand. It's hard to say that, apparently. So they look to the Nordic countries. And they say that, okay, we have problems and we can solve them because in the Nordic countries they have solved them without cutting taxes and without cutting the welfare state. And that is more politically correct as a politician to say, oh, we don't have to do anything that's uncomfortable at all. The Nordic countries show the way. They can be prosperous and have high growth rates and everything, and they have not done anything which is really, really tough to anyone. So that's the politically easy solution. There was a prime minister once who said, we know what to do, we just don't know how to get re-elected afterwards. It's Jean-Claude Juncker, Prime Minister of Luxembourg, and that captures exactly the mindset of politicians. They want to do things to improve their countries, but they don't want to do uncomfortable things. And that's why they don't look to the radically free market countries, so they look to the Nordic countries, which seem to be not reforming that much, but still performing well.